The gospel we have heard this evening makes me rather uncomfortable. Jesus commands his disciples to go out on the road 2 by 2, carrying no money bag, knapsack, wearing no sandals, greeting nobody on the road, and going from house to house, inviting themselves to stay with strangers. It's pretty clear that I don't do any of these things, and nor do even the most austere clergy and missionaries. When I struggle with a gospel passage, I often turn to the writings of my hero, St. Augustine. I must say I was very glad indeed that one of the first things Pope Leo announced on the loggia of St. Peter's was that he was to remain a son of Augustine. While it certainly took honesty for the bishop to admit in his confessions that he faced temptation, loving women, wine and song, and all the special pleasures of doing something wrong before his baptism, it was much more immediately obvious to his congregation that he did not quite meet the standards we have just heard Jesus give to the 72. He preached a sermon on this passage around 397, 398. He was visiting Carthage, a much more important city than his own Hippo, and he must have felt rather like a preacher coming from Campion Hall to Oriel, rather nervous in grander surrounds than those to which he had become accustomed. I'd like to quote just a little from this text. "Do not," he says, "carry a purse. What do we do, in fact? I carry a purse. I admit it. When I go on a journey, I carry expenses for the road. Nor a bag. I carry a bag. Nor shoes. What? Did he tell us to walk around barefoot? You can see for yourselves, we all wear shoes. And now the next item. If anyone greets us on the road and we don't greet them back, we are judged and condemned as proud. We are spoken ill of, and this leads to speaking ill of the Lord. So, we also salute people on the road. The next thing, however, is quite easy, to say on entering a house, 'Peace to this house.' But how thoroughly we are caught red-handed with purses and shoes." Augustine's honesty here, I don't think, is one of particular disclosure like in the Confessions, but an acknowledgement of the obvious. And I don't think Jesus' injunction here was ever intended as a literal set of instructions for clergy and missionaries, not even in the apostolic age. The first conversion of a Gentile to Christianity, that of the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8, also written by Luke, took place precisely because Philip greeted him on a road. Augustine shows how even Jesus himself doesn't practice what he preaches if we take it literally. This Lord of ours, this is Augustine now, has funds on the road. As for these shoes I walk in, this Lord of mine tells me not to worry. If he hadn't worn shoes, John would not have said about him, "I am unworthy to undo his shoelaces." As for greeting on the road, this is me again, the examples are too many to number. I think we're in pretty safe company then to look with St. Augustine for a deeper meaning to this text. I wish to dwell on 3 of the ways Augustine reads this set of instructions from Jesus, that to carry no purse, that to greet nobody on the road, and that to go from house to house saying, "Peace be with you." Augustine interprets the command to carry no purse as an injunction to openness about the good news. He says, what is a purse anyway? Money shut up, wisdom hidden away. What's the meaning of do not carry a purse? Do not keep wisdom to yourselves. Receive the Spirit. It ought to be a spring in you, not a purse. Something to be spent and splashed around, not something to be shut up and held tightly. So I think we can see then with Augustine that the purse is not bad because of what it contains. For Augustine, it symbolises that which we hold back. Just as money is only really valuable if it is eventually spent, so too the gospel is only lived authentically if it is shared. And the gospel doesn't accrue interest, but remains priceless and inexhaustible, and so should be, as Augustine puts it, splashed around. Augustine's image of this good news as a spring demonstrates the overflowing superabundance of the peace the 72 are commanded to share. It is not to be shut up and guarded, with distribution carefully controlled, as in the brand management strategies of the luxury world. Carrying no purse means going out, holding the gospel in an open hand to all who wish to receive it, which we only do if we live authentic, transparent lives in which the peace and joy of the gospel can be seen by all. Likewise, in the commandment to greet nobody on the road, Augustine also does not think here that Jesus is commanding his disciples to simply ignore people. It would be much easier if he did. Quite the opposite. He asks, do you think it's right that when we meet our nearest and dearest on the road, we ignore them, that we shouldn't greet our elders or return the salutations of our juniors? Is that how you fulfill the gospel, by keeping mum when someone greets you? On the contrary, Augustine argues, we are to greet nobody on the road only. We are to encounter them much more seriously than that. Augustine says, people who greet others only on the road bid them farewell casually or by the way, literally. Augustine notes that for an evangelist, this would mean proclaiming salvation casually, by the road, by the way, which is not really evangelizing at all. So I think Augustine here wants us to take seriously the gospel we preach, take seriously the way we preach, this evening accepted, and take seriously those to whom we preach. In all of this, we can only do so if we live in that open and transparent way, taking people seriously and holding ourselves open to encounter. So, with the openness of an outstretched hand, no purse, and a commandment to take others seriously, we now come to Christ's command that we proclaim peace. Augustine takes this, as with the other injunctions, to speak about an integrity of life rooted in friendship with Christ. He tells his congregation this: such then should Christ's apostles be, preachers of the gospel, not simply greeting on the road, that is, not looking for something else in the distance, but proclaiming the gospel out of genuine fraternal love. Let them then come to the house and say, peace be to this house. They don't only say it with their lips, they pour out what they themselves have and know. They preach peace, and they have peace. They are not like those of whom it is said, peace, peace, and there is no peace. You can't give what you ain't got, the saying goes, and I think this is what Augustine's getting at. I've always thought it striking that the first thing Christ here has his disciples say when they arrive is peace. In John 14, where Jesus says goodbye to his disciples before the Passion, he promises the Holy Spirit and tells them that he leaves them peace, his own peace, a peace the world cannot give. Paul tells the Ephesians that Christ is our peace because he has broken down the dividing walls of death. So I think really Christ is enjoining the disciples not to preach a sort of vague peace, because that kind of peace we can never really have, but the true peace which is himself, which we can only experience through real friendship with him. In order to be effective disciples, we must live that peace which being a friend of God brings. Peace, like friendship, is only convincing if it is shown and experienced, not simply spoken of. In not carrying a purse and interacting meaningfully with people, all of this shows that we are to be confident in an authentic discipleship, which has nothing to hide. It is not self-conscious. It is this which allows those who are sent to proclaim Christ's peace. He told them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers to the harvest field." I certainly think that this commandment speaks to all Christians, but there is a long tradition of understanding it as referring particularly to those who, in some sense, dedicate themselves full-time to the proclamation of the gospel, especially as priests, missionaries, contemplative monks and nuns, and others who give themselves full-time to doing God. Augustine's way of reading this sending of the 72 reminds us that it is important to pray for vocations to this kind of service, to encourage others in it, and perhaps consider it for ourselves. Our dear chaplain has asked me to say a little about my own, rather unremarkable, very small way of trying to do this. For 3 years now, I've had the absolute privilege of being a brother of the Oratory of St. Philip Neri in York. Oratories are small groups of priests and those training to be priests who live together in one place and undertake rather ordinary priestly work, inspired by St. Philip Neri, the patron saint of joy, and in this country by the Oriolensis St. John Henry Newman, who brought the oratory from Rome to England, first to Birmingham, my own home city, in 1847. In York, for example, we have care of a city centre parish, a suburban parish, a shrine, and a university chaplaincy. We don't do anything particularly different, although we try our best with the liturgy and sacred music. But what makes us distinct is the way we try to follow the example set by St. Philip Neri and St. John Henry, which places a real emphasis on the individual and the formation of authentic relationships. I'm sure that this particular community has grown pretty fed up with hearing about John Henry Newman. But I hope that, as an Oratorian and Oriolensis, you will indulge me just this once, even if it means I'm not invited back. I want to quote from a little-known paper Newman gave to his fellow Oratorians in 1848, just after he had brought the idea of the oratory back from Rome to darkest Birmingham. Again, I can say that I'm from there, which he started with a group of friends. He told them this: "I will say in a word what is the nearest approximation, in fact, to an Oratorian congregation that I know. This is one of the colleges in the Anglican universities, hint, Oriel. Take such a college, destroy the head's house, annihilate wife and children, give the fellows missionary and pastoral work, and there you have a congregation of St. Philip before your very eyes." I think this comment makes much more sense in the context of 1848, when, under the old university statutes, the college fellowship consisted primarily of Anglican clergy. And I don't want Lord and Lady Mendoza to panic. I think any idea of the annihilation of the provost's family and house comes from the fact that in the 1840s, the provost was the only member of the governing body who would have been married and had his own separate living quarters. I think that eyebrows would have been raised if this were the case for the provost of an oratory. But what I think this musing from St. John Henry really betrays is that his extraordinary life after his time in Oriel, as an Oratorian, theologian and educationalist, was so profoundly shaped by his time here at Oriel, which he so loved. Although his life after Oxford and Birmingham took in many ways a rather different shape to that he lived here, there is a fundamental continuity. The attraction Newman saw in the oratory was its similarity in many ways to Oriel, the relative freedom of individual members to take their own work in a way that suits their own abilities, or lack of ability, and interests against the background of a shared life of prayer and dining in common. All this he experienced at Oriel. There are also some more mundane similarities which make me smile. Both Oriel, the Birmingham Oratory, and those descended from it keep Candlemas as the feast of foundation. The Oratory Library in Birmingham is modelled on the senior library here, and the recreation room of the Birmingham Oratory in its colour and decor was, until recently, endearingly similar to the small SCR. But I think more importantly than that, It's his famed capacity for friendship and for relationship as a means for winning souls and growing in love, together with his work and writing as an educationalist, that he all learned here at Oriel, that he exercised most profoundly, and which he took with him to the oratory. St. John Henry really provides a model for us all, especially to any here tonight who are thinking of some kind of ordained ministry or dedicated service, in how deeply he allowed himself to be formed by his time at Oriel, and how this formation meant that, when he eventually left, he took the best of what he had learned, the openness to friendship and relationship, to Birmingham. I, in my own very small way, found the oratory through Newman's example. I too feel deeply shaped by my time here in this place. Newman's time was not perfect. He was not perfect. And this place was not, back then anyway, a Shangri-La. But here he learned a way of relating to others, both fellows and students, in openness, honesty and concern that was deeply human, just as Augustine imagines the workers in the harvest field. I know that I certainly wouldn't be doing anything I'm doing now if it weren't for the friendship and encouragement of so many here at Oriel, both students and fellows, during my time as an undergraduate, which was not without its difficulties. Many of these friendships sustained me then and continue to sustain me now, and I'm glad to be here tonight among so many friends, and I hope that when we all leave this place, this too will be the case. Like St. John Henry, many here will feel themselves called in some ways to be a worker in Christ's harvest. So, when you do go out, when you leave this place, take the best of what you found here. Jesus calls us to go out as labourers for the harvest, but we are not, as one popular song puts it, to be beasts of burden. Instead, we are to be human labourers in the harvest who, as Augustine teaches, bring Christ's peace to others through friendship, both with him and with them. Our time at university is so important, and we must really learn from it, but most especially, we must learn friendship. While Newman's Oriel brand way of going into the harvest made him the first non-martyred Englishman canonised after the Reformation in the Catholic Church, and the first native English doctor of the Church since the Venerable Bede, our own more modest way of going into the harvest, taking the best of Oriel out into the world, might, by God's grace, indeed, make a saint of both me and you. The harvest is plentiful, but the labourers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out labourers to the harvest.